My absolute pleasure to be here. I only recently joined the company, so I am very excited to be a part of this beautiful whiskey. It is just such a gift. So I am Jennifer Wren. I go by Jenny, and people often ask. I have been actually in the single malt business for almost these more than a decade years. And but my entire universe was always Scottish single malt. So when I was given the opportunity to work with American single malt, I was just completely just overwhelmed with joy. And to work with an American single malt of this caliber is just such a feather in my cap. So I am here tonight. I'm going to be your host for a majority of the tasting, taking you through everything. And then we also have, and let me introduce my colleague and one of my favorite human beings, Sam Bolt. He is actually coming to you from Virginia tonight. Sam, do you want to make a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thrilled to be here. Oversee the visitor center right in Livingston, Virginia. So come see us. I'm there, 5 days a week. So really getting to experience this this wonderful whiskey day in, day out on such a close personal level. So thank you, Jenny, for bringing me along for this journey.
Awesome, Sam. So glad you're here tonight. So we're going to talk through a second about how tonight's going to go, a couple ground rules, and I'm explaining to you why Sam's tag teaming with me. So basically tonight, we're going to be sampling through or tasting through the Courage and Conviction line. So over at Virginia Distillery Company, we have several what we refer to as brands, and Courage and Conviction is one of them. So before we do anything else, let's talk about the order in which we are tasting tonight, okay? The cool thing is it's actually behind me as well. So if you get confused, we're going in this order. So the first thing we're tasting tonight is going to be what I like to refer to as our Baby in Blue, the signature malt. That will be followed by the bourbon cask. That is the one that is green. That will be followed then by the red wine cuvee cask. That is the one that is that beautiful purple. And last but not least, bringing up the rear is my personal favorite, which is our sherry cask. So I'm going to go over that one more time, starting with signature malt in blue, moving on to bourbon cask in green, moving on to red wine cuvee cask in purple, and then finishing finishing the deconstruction with the sherry cask in that beautiful maroon. So that's the order. If you get confused, it is directly behind me. And I'll also introduce them as we go through. Number two, I am going to ask everybody, I know the host can be in charge of this, but please do be considerate about keeping your mics off. When we have a tasting of this size, it can just get completely out of control. If someone's chasing their cat or like crinkling a newspaper or eating spaghetti into a microphone, it gets a little bananas. So we want to keep the mics off. During the first half, when I'm doing most of the talking, we're going to ask you if you have questions to put them in the chat. Now, this is where the talented Mr. Bolt comes in. Sam is not only in charge of running our visitor center, but he also has a degree in brewing and distilling. So even though I have a really high level of technical knowledge, when it comes to the day-to-day of what's happening at the distillery, Sam is going to be able to answer some really in-depth questions. So, just put them in there. We're paying attention to it. If the question doesn't get answered immediately, it doesn't mean we've ignored you. It might be that we've logged it down to talk about later. Sound good? Okay. The first thing that we're going to do today is we are going to taste some whiskey. The most important thing as you go through this tasting, guys, is save some whiskey, okay? Because you want to go back and compare and contrast, especially with the first whiskey that we are tasting tonight. So I would love for everybody to pick up a glass of that beautiful Courage and Conviction signature blend in blue. And I'm going to talk to you for just a second about how I like to taste whiskey. Now, there is so much of what I'm going to talk about tonight. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. There's only, different ways of trying stuff. But I like to do this when I first pick up a sample of whiskey. I like to bring it up to my nose, and I like to breathe in with my mouth open. Okay. The reason for this is there's two things happening simultaneously. One, you are literally inhaling whiskey vapors this way, right, through your nose. And then you're also, by breathing out through your mouth, experiencing something called retronasal olfaction. Now, that sounds really complicated, but all it really means is as you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, it's hard to do while talking, you are literally bringing all of the aromas of the whiskey in a loop through your nose and across your tongue. So you're going retronasal, right? This can also happen oppositely. If you take a little bit of the whiskey in your mouth and I'm talking a little tiny bit because we got to get your palate ready for everything that we're about to drink. You're going to take a little in your mouth and you're going to chew it. Like this. Like a gargling with mouthwash. Get it all up in there. Around your gums, all over your tongue, around your teeth, up here in that little weird space behind your frenulum, all that stuff. Like get that whiskey all in there. Okay, does everybody chew their whiskey? So now what you're going to do is you're going to exhale really hard through your nose. Now what's going to happen is, not only do we get those salivary glands going, which helps you taste better, we also just push all of those aromas in the opposite direction, back through your throat and down through your nose. And you can actually smell different things. Now, you don't have to do this every time you sample, but it's just a fun little exercise to see what you smelled when you first smelled it, what you tasted when it first hit your tongue, and then what you smelled differently when you use that retronasal power of exhaling through your nose. Okay, now that you've taken that first crunchy sip, we're going to take a second sip. And it's going to be slightly different because now your body has gotten used to the shock of the alcohol. Okay, so we're going to take another little sip. And this time you can just luxuriate in it. Just let it go across your palate. See what you notice. Okay. So our lead blender, Amanda, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, she likes to say that we have a house style that involves orchard fruit and spice. So I'm not going to tell you initially what those orchard fruits or spices are, but I want you to consider that as I begin to tell the tale of Virginia Distillery Company, as you're enjoying the signature malt, and remember, leave a little, right? We want to always drink responsibly and drink slowly. I want you to just consider what kind of fruit you might be noticing or what kind of spice you might be noticing. There's also a lot of other flavors taking place within the whiskey, so do not feel like there is a wrong answer. Well, okay, there's one wrong answer. I'll give it away to you guys. None of our whiskeys have peat in them. So you're not going to notice or smell any peat. If you're noticing or smelling a smoky element, it is probably coming from the charring of the barrels or the toasting of the barrels. Okay, so no peat here. If you're a big Scotch fan, we do not peat over at Virginia Distillery Company. So the last thing I'm going to go over really fast before we start, I guess we've already started sort of, is the rules of American single malt. Now, this is quiz time, Sam. You're going to have to raise your hand and point at me if I say this wrong, but we are not officially a type of whiskey yet, which is a funny thing to say because the federal government has not recognized us as a federally mandated American whiskey. The reason I point that out is we are waiting any day now to get federal approval for the standardization of what an American single malt is. This is really exciting because the last time that there was any federal standardization of an American whiskey was in 1969, the Summer of Love. So this is a really big deal, guys. We're really excited to be part of this category. So the rules of an American single malt, here we go. Only 3 ingredients: water, yeast, and barley. That is the same for every single malt across the globe: water, yeast, and barley. Okay. Number 2, the whiskey from milling, this is when we break down the barley, all the way to bottling, must take place in the United States. Now, what that means is somebody can import the grain they're using, the malted barley they're using. We don't do that. Actually, all of our malted barley comes from North America. So we're like American from soup to nuts, but it's really from milling to bottling. All of this must take place, rule number 3, at one distillery. Can't be multiple distilleries, can't be sourced whiskey that's matured, has to be made at that distillery and matured and bottled at that distillery. It cannot go into a cask at higher than, oh, this is the one, Sam. Is it? Yeah, no, wait, I got it. Okay. It cannot be bottled at higher than 80 proof, but it cannot go into the cask at higher than, Sam, help me out here.
125.
There you are, 125 proof. So it cannot be higher than 125 going into the cask, cannot be higher than 80 proof going into the bottle, and it cannot be matured in a vessel larger than 700 liters, which is not a problem for us because none of our vessels are 700 liters. So I know that sounds pretty complicated. Yeah, I know. I love it so close. Everyone's, I was so close. I was so close. But these rules for the moment do not include an age statement. Now, a lot of whiskeys do have age statements. Bourbon, 2 years. Rye, 2 years, right? So we may have a situation that when the TTB releases, that we will have an age statement. So as of right now, no age statement, okay? But keep in mind, all the whiskeys you're trying tonight are an average age between 5 and 7 years. The first initial releases from our distillery were 4 years old, but we've matured a little past that. So you're going to get into the 5 to 7 year range. So that's kind of an exciting thing, and it'll make a little bit more sense when I talk about climate. Okay, so guys, enjoy sipping your whiskey. I'm going to dig a little bit into our history. So I'm going to invite you to take a journey with me that begins in the green rolling hills of Ireland, moves us to the breathtaking majesty of the Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, of which you are very familiar, UVA alum, and then invites you to imagine a summit even higher, not yet achieved. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I am so thrilled. Okay, let's give it just 1 second. Okay, if you can see my screen, nod your head. Awesome, thanks, Victoria. Okay, so our journey begins with our founder, Dr. George Moore. So Dr. George Moore was the son of a shoemaker from Louth County, Ireland. So he is an Irish immigrant. And in 1972, he made his way to America to find his fortune. And fortune he did find. He became one of the most successful Irish-American immigrants of his generation. But the truth of the matter was, George was actually a lifelong whiskey enthusiast and collector. Right? That was where his real passion lied. And he always had this dream, even when he was a younger man, of building a world-class single malt distillery in his chosen home of Virginia. So in 2011, George finally had the opportunity to unite his two passions, business and whiskey, when he founded Virginia Distillery Company. Now, he did this with the help of many of his lifelong friends and one of the most famous experts in whiskey, Harry Coburn. So if you're a single malt nerd, I'm sure we have some in the crowd, Harry Coburn is the former chief engineer and production director of Bowmore. Bowmore is located on the island of Islay off the coast of Scotland. So Harry had been previously working on some heavily peated scotches, so this is a little bit different from him. So the land had been purchased, the team had been assembled, everything was absolutely in place for success. And then tragedy struck. In 2013, just 18 months after breaking ground in the distillery, George suddenly left us. And we all get a little emotional about that, you know, but this is not a sad story. This is actually a joyful and extremely happy story. Oh, let's see. Oh, there we go. So at the time of George's death, his son, Gareth, who you're seeing in this picture right here, had never even been to the distillery site. So this was just something that George was doing on the side. And about 2 weeks after George's passing, he and his mother, Angela, were in the office with the lawyers, and they're going through a bunch of papers. And the lawyer mentions this whiskey project that George had been working on. And Angela looks at her son and she goes, "You should go down to Nelson County and see what your father was working on." So for the first time, just a couple of weeks later, Gareth stepped onto the distillery site, and it looked very much like the picture you're seeing right now. It was hardly anything. And as he stood there, the two giant copper pot stills that were made in Elgin and imported through Istanbul, Turkey to us were just sitting there. They were just sitting there in the open field, waiting for the buildings to be built around them. And Gareth was just completely moved by the ambitious scale of his father's vision. And as he stood there, he realized that this wasn't just a dream. It was actually a viable business. So he picked up the phone, he called his mom, Angela, and he said, "We're going to do this for Dad." And in the ensuing months and years, Gareth had quite a difficult journey. You see, his entire background was in finance, and he knew nothing about the whiskey business. So he had to learn everything from building the distillery to the three-tier system to how to operate in the United States, where there's tons of laws. And he just figured out every aspect of the business slowly but surely in pursuit of his father's vision. And on November 19th, 8:40 a.m. in the morning, 2015, the first drops ran from the still. The first American single malt was created at Virginia Distillery Company, and history was born. And thus, here we are today. I'm with you guys, all like 200 of you guys here to celebrate Virginia Distillery Company. And I just want to let you know, at Virginia Distillery Company, we do one thing, and we do it really well. Make exceptional American single malt whiskey. And as I take you through the tasting today, you're going to see just how good this single malt whiskey truly is. So our whiskey stands on 4 principles. Please keep them in mind tonight. Principle number 1 is a carefully crafted world-class distillate. We're going to go back to that, but there's a lot of reasons that we have some of the best new make spirit in the entire world. Number 2, the intentional exposure of our whiskey to Virginia's dynamic climate. And I'm sure, having gone to UVA, you are all familiar with Virginia's very dynamic climate. Then we have our intentional unification of New World technique and Old World cask. So we are making whiskey here in the United States, but we are using casks that are traditional, and many of them are from Europe. We will talk about that. And last but not least, of course, the inherited vision from Dr. George Moore that compels us every day to make excellent single malt whiskey. So all of these principles work together, from Sam at the VC to Dora in brand to me over here in Los Angeles talking about whiskey. We want to make and talk about the finest whiskey ever, and we want to distill it to complete perfection. So with that, let's drink some more whiskey, because I'm doing a lot of talking. I need to wet my whistle over here. So let's go back to our signature malt. Now, everybody take a moment again, give it a nice sniff. Yeah, this is really good whiskey. And I want to see in the comments, and I keep having to open up different things as I go on. Oh, you know what? I am going to stop really fast and answer this question, because this is very special to me. Rob Rise is asking, is barley gluten-free? Okay, that's an excellent question. Barley itself is not gluten-free, okay? But once the whiskey has gone through the distillation process, it is entirely gluten-free. In the United Kingdom, they will not allow whiskey to be designated gluten safe, because there is hypothetically powdered milling powder that can be in the atmosphere and hypothetically create cross-contamination. In the US, this is considered a gluten-free product. And the reason this is so special to me, Rob, is I get asked this constantly, and I have a horrible gluten allergy, and I drink whiskey almost every damn day. So I can assure you, hasn't killed me yet, and you are safe. The one call out I would give for those out there who suffer from celiac or gluten sensitivity is rum. A lot of rums will use a coloring process that has a gluten element. It is the only distilled spirit that does so. So even if this was to have a color element, whiskey does not use a gluten-based coloring agent. So that's just something to keep in mind if you have a deep sensitivity. Okay, let's go back to our whiskey now. Glad you asked that question. I'm happy to illuminate more about that. Okay, so this is our signature malt. This is the baby in blue by which everything else comes. This is like everything we're going to talk about tonight. This is the starting point. So what you're going to find, like I said, is the house style of our whiskeys: orchard fruit and spice. Now I'm going to invite everybody right now to put in the comments, what kind of spice are you noting and what kind of orchard fruit are you tasting? Okay. Anybody? I'll give it a sip. Cinnamon, peach pepper, apple. Yeah. Pear, vanilla, pie spice, definitely. I'm loving this. Orange peel. I get orange peel a lot in this one too. Fantastic, guys. So officially, Amanda, our lead blender, who I will talk about a little bit again, she likes to say the 2 keynotes on this one are apricot and ginger spice. I just pictured the Spice Girls. I don't know if that was just me. So the reason I'm always hesitant to tell you what to taste is that smell and taste are highly, what's the word I'm looking for? Suggestive. So the second I say this tastes like candy canes, even if it's not in the whiskey, you will begin to taste candy canes, right? So you're gonna start being like, oh yeah, there's definitely a candy cane element in this. Now, if we were drinking rye and I said that might actually be accurate, but not in an American single malt. So apricot and ginger spice is what Amanda likes to say. So a little bit earlier, I talked about our 72-hour fermentation. So when we're talking about fermentation, we're talking about the time that we're going to be taking that wort that we have strained all this water from the barley, and now we put it in these fermentation tanks and we've dropped the yeast in, okay, right? And during this time, what do yeast like to do? Yeast are like, I like to say, rock stars in a hotel room. They like to drink, they party, and they die. That's what yeast do. So during this time, they're soaking up all that sugar, and they're expelling all of this alcohol, right? So this whole time, depending on how long you ferment, you're going to create different flavors. So if let's say we had a middle fermentation time, like maybe a 36-hour, right? 36-hour, I'm going to get a lot of honeys, cereal notes. The whiskey might have a little bit more of like a Honey Nut Cheerios quality to it. A really good example of that's the Balvenie. If you ever had Balvenie, it has like almost like a sweetened honey note to it. That's going to be a mid-range fermentation, something between 30 and 40 hours. But we have a long fermentation. And when you push fermentation as far as we do, right around the 72-hour mark, what you're going to do is you're going to create fruity esters, which is also my drag name. No, fruity esters. So if we do not create esters in the fermentation process, these little flavor molecules, they cannot exist at the end point, right? So by choosing to create these fruity esters, no matter what happens to this whiskey from distillation to maturation, those little fruity esters are they're gonna still stay there. So when we talk about orchard fruit, you're not getting that from a cask. You're actually getting it from this lengthened 72-hour fermentation in which those fruity flavor notes are created at the very end, right? So what are some other things that kind of differentiates our brand? Well, one of it, was that English? I don't know. One of the things is we have some of the softest water in the world, okay? Soft water. Now, what's super cool about that, having worked on Speyside single malts for a very long time, is our water is almost chemically exact to the water that flows through Speyside, Scotland. So George was very intelligent in picking where he wanted to have his distillery and the water he wanted to use, that beautiful Blue Ridge Mountain water. Also, it always makes your hair look good. So anytime you go to the distillery, you're gonna have great hair. The second thing is, when we're talking about the barley that we use, that we source from only North America, we're using 2-row spring barley. So one of the things that's really important to us is we are not trying to seek out a lot of flavor impact from the barley itself. We seek out flavor impact from maturation, which is the opposite of beer. Okay, because remember, we're making a distilled product. Even though we start with a beer, we're making a distilled product, right? So we're not looking for the flavors from that barley. We're looking for excellence and yield from that barley. And then last but not least, we use a proprietary 2-strain yeast recipe. One is to create those esters that I mentioned previously, and one is for efficiency to create alcohol. And no, guys, I'm really sorry. It is proprietary. Amanda has threatened my life. I cannot tell you what it is, no matter what, even if you beg or ask in the comments, okay? So it is a proprietary 2-yeast strain. So that being said, this is our whiskey number 1. I think it's just darn fine, and I am really in love with it. So I hope that you guys are enjoying it as well. So we're gonna move on to our whiskey number 2. Oh, I lied. We're not moving on to our whiskey number 2. We're moving on to Harry Coburn. Here he is, Mr. Harry. This is Mr. Harry Coburn. So this new make distillate that I've been talking about for 20 minutes now is from the dedication of Mr. Harry Coburn. He was a longtime friend of our founder, George Moore, and as I mentioned, chief engineer and production director at Bowmore. So Harry actually came over to Virginia after George's passing and guided Gareth through the installation of our production system. Now, that is a very big deal because this man was a genius, right? So he ensured that we have a meticulous fermentation and distillation regimen. So Gareth relied almost entirely on Harry's expertise because, I mean, again, remember, Gareth didn't know what he was doing at the time, and he trusted Harry to build us a world-class distillery. So we wanted it to be standardized in the traditional Scottish single malt style, but able to create a distillate that would work in our volatile climate, which it certainly does. So you can see on these images, I really like this. The one that is I don't know if it's to your left or to right, the one that has the beautiful spiral staircase behind it, that is our still. And the one that has the blue pipe behind it, that is the still at Bowmore. Now, I could teach an entire class on still shapes and what they do to whiskey. We don't have time for that tonight, although I can cover it a little bit in the end if you want, but you'll notice these are not too dissimilar. So despite the fact we're not making a heavily peated, oily whiskey, which is, common in Islay, our distillate has a viscosity to it, or like a richer mouthfeel, because of the choice of using this type of still. And that's 100% Harry Coburn. So that's really freaking cool. So our distillery was not only built upon traditional principles because of Harry, we also benefit from that exceptional water. And, I just mentioned it again, that exceptional soft water. But the big thing is that while our water is extremely similar to Speyside, our climate is entirely different, okay? So guys, I don't even have to tell you because you went to UVA, you know this, right? It is so crazy. Scotland's weather is steady, cool, damp, right? They're lucky if they lose 6 to 8% in a year. We are located in Livingston, Virginia, where we can see temperature swings as much as 40 degrees in a single day. I witnessed this. I was there for 2 days. One day I'm wearing a winter coat. One day I'm wearing a bikini. We've actually threatened to get Brian, our warehouse guy, a bikini for the summer months because, he's a big dude. It's really sweaty in there. So back in 2015, okay, now I'm taking you all the way back again. Gareth had this idea in his head that because the temperature was so volatile, that he wanted to have climate controlled warehouses. Now, this is not only specific, but it's expensive. So this was a huge endeavor, right? To build these climate controlled warehouses. So enter Dr. Jim Swan, man of mystery. That's what we like to call around the distillery. This whiskey dude is an absolute legend in the industry. He unfortunately is with us no longer, but he certainly made his mark. And he was a man obsessed, and I do mean obsessed with the interaction between whiskey and wood. Okay, he built his entire career on this. And he had previously worked with Harry Coburn at a little distillery you might have heard called Cavalon over, in Asia. So they had a former relationship. So Harry enticed Jim to come on down to beautiful Livingston, Virginia, and to help us build our maturation program. So after consulting with Jim Swan, Gareth realized that he had a terrible idea. He should not do climate controlled warehouses, because Jim believed that the interaction between our dynamic Virginia climate and the whiskey was going to create something that would give the whiskey a sense of provenance or sense of place, right? Because if we just stuck this beautiful distillate in barrels and then stuck it in a climate controlled warehouse, it could literally be made anywhere. What's the point of celebrating that we're in Virginia? It doesn't mean anything, right? And spoiler alert, Dr. Jim Swan was right. So he enabled us to have these beautiful, beautiful casks that are interacting with the Virginia climate constantly, and we age our whiskey faster. I like to say in Scotland, whiskey is patience, and in Virginia, whiskey is passion, because we are passionate people. Virginia is for whiskey lovers, I like to say. So until his passing in 2017, Dr. Swan stayed, and he guided our maturation program. And he shared with us his extensive network of casks all over Europe. And that is something that we celebrate and we enjoy to this day. We have unparalleled access to some of the finest aging casks or barrels on planet Earth. And that is all due to the illustrious and very honorable Dr. Jim Swan. Okay, so today, our cask houses, just a little hill up from the distillery. There are thousands of barrels filled with American single malt. And I hope that you guys all get to see them because you're not too far away. You can actually go and stand in our cask house. And they intentionally endure these hot, humid summers, cold, crisp winters. And we intentionally have that amazing angel share. And it is that volatility that allows us to enjoy all the complex flavors and tastes that we're going to enjoy tonight, right? So I like to say in Scotland, as I just said, whiskey is patience, but for us at Virginia Distillery Company, whiskey is passion. Okay, so we're going to break down this beautiful cask. We're doing tonight something that's really fun that I like to refer to as a deconstruction tasting. Now, we have the magic here that we bottle our deconstruction. Sometimes I have to bring in special liquid, but we actually deconstruct the whiskey in the bottles that you have in front of you tonight. This is super cool. Now, what does that mean? It means that the first whiskey we tried tonight is actually a combination of every other cask type we're going to try this evening. Okay. So imagine this, right? It's a lot to wrap your head around, but if you picture this bottle right here, this beautiful blue bottle, it's like a symphony. It's a symphony of flavor. And every cask type that is put into this is a different instrument that adds a tone or a mood or a melody line. Okay, so I want you to think about that as we move through all the different cask types. So the next whiskey that we're going to try, this is your green bottle. This is the bourbon. Okay. This is ex-bourbon American oak. Okay, now what the hell does that mean? I know that we have varying levels of folks in here with whiskey knowledge. So we like to use the term first fill ex-bourbon. Now, the irony about that term is it's actually second fill, because what was in the cask the first time? Bourbon, but it's the first time we fill it. So we say first fill ex-bourbon American oak. Most of the American oak in use in whiskey barrels in the United States comes from the Midwest. So tends to come from the Midwest. The casks are created in Kentucky. We source primarily from Willett Family Reserve, if you are a fan of Willett, and from Woodford Reserve over at Brown-Forman, two fantastic distilleries making some pretty damn good whiskey. Now, Sam, you may disagree with me. Let's not get in a fight publicly, okay? I don't care very much what the bourbon was. It doesn't really make a difference to me. I care about what the bourbon did. Okay. Sam agrees with me. Yeah, because you never know, Sam. First time we're doing a tasting together. I care about what the bourbon does. And what the bourbon does is it tempers down new make barrels. Now, why does this matter? Okay. So a new make barrel, which is perfect for making bourbon, hot climate, big, bold corn, it can like really stand up to that new make, right? Malt is actually a very, very delicate grain. So when you put it in a new make barrel, sometimes it can get a little over oaked, a little papery. It's like a little too much, a little too hot and aggressive. When you put malt in a cask that has had bourbon in it, you are getting the best of that cask. You are getting the sweet vanillas. You're getting those gentle oaky notes, some gentle wood char notes, a lot of vanillin that's coming out of that cask, right? So you're getting the best of the cask that started its life as pretty, pretty hot wood, okay? So let's lift this one to our nose. Now, we're not going to do every single step again this time. We're going to enjoy ourselves, right? But I do invite you to take a whiff, some of those beautiful aromas. I definitely immediately noticed the bourbon cask influence. The key marker for that is always big vanilla. It's like that is just across the board, big vanilla from bourbon casks. It's going to happen every time. But there's a lot going on here. I'm definitely getting an orchard fruit right at the top. Anybody want to throw something in the comments? Right. Okay. So we talked about our symphony. I like to refer to our ex-bourbon American oak because it's providing a whole bunch of structure. I like to think of this as the double bass. Right. And when I say structure, I don't literally mean it is angular. You'll hear me talk a lot about shapes in whiskey, but it's creating sort of the backbone of everything that happens in our signature malts. Let's give that a sip. Nick Lawson, you said apple and caramel. You're right on. You're right on, sir. Yeah. Anybody else? So remember, we're orchard fruit spice, orchard fruit spice. I'm having way too much fun over here. Cool. Okay. So Amanda likes to say for this one in particular, green apple. I definitely noticed the green apple, not so much the red apple, right? Because a red apple is a little bit more ruddy, a little bit more deeper and sweeter. The green has that little bite to it, right? And cinnamon. So I would say this is the pumpkin pie of everything that we're going to try tonight. I'm an apple pie. I said pumpkin pie. I'm an apple pie of everything that we're going to try tonight. Cool. Seeing some great comments, vanilla, peaches. Oh, thank you, Trisha. Trisha said that's delicious. I think so too. Thank you very much. So again, I like to say this is the double bass. This is the bottom of the symphony. It's holding up the entire flavor profile of the signature malt. And it is an excellent example of a malt that is aged in ex-bourbon. For those of you that are Scotch nerds out there, a lot of people will come up to me and they'll be like, oh, well, I drink this because I like single malt Scotch. What would you suggest? I would say for those of you out there that are a fan of that, like the softer Speyside Scotches, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, this is kind of in that universe. It's the soft, gentle, fruit forward selection of the courage and conviction line. So this is the one that's going to be the most like those gentler, softer single malt scotches, right? Okay, so we're going to move on to our next one. Now, this is our red wine cuvee. Now, you don't have to wait for me to drink for you to drink, so enjoy yourself, go ahead. But I do recommend saving a little bit of your whiskey so you can go back and taste things again. Now, remember Dr. Jim Swan? So Dr. Swan not only gave us his contacts, his expertise, his advice to Gareth, he also shared with us something that he actually created. It's called the STR cask. What the hell does that mean? Well, shave, toast. Some people say rechar, okay? Some people say shave, toast, rechar, refurbish, okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, you know, I used to have a bunch of props. I get like Gallagher. I guess I'll just use my hands. So when a cask is expanding and contracting, right, from the weather, contracting when it's cold, expanding when it's hot, the whiskey actually breathes in and out of a couple of layers of the wood, right? So it's almost like the wood is a filtration system. So it's taking away things like sulfites and negative flavors, and it's putting back in delicious, wonderful flavors like that vanilla and that oak, right? So what we would do is we would get red wine casks from Europe, and we would use Dr. Swan's STR method. So that means that we would go in and we would shave off some of the water line where the wine had penetrated the cask. We would then get it to a certain point, just past that water line. And then we would go in and we would either retoast, because all casks are toasted, or we might rechar a char layer on top of the toast layer, right? So what that does is it gives you a little bit of the red wine influence, but it also gives you a cask that's almost refurbished, and we can get more of the oak coming through the wine versus just kind of a big fat wine note, you know, and a wine note is fantastic, but that's not what we're going for. So we use this STR method. It's used all around the world. And again, that is from Dr. Jim Swan. So we source our wine casks from many different people. It's hard to pinpoint it down. We get them from Portugal, we get them from France, we get them from Spain, and we also use a range of wines. So we use everything from Malbecs to Shiraz to Merlot occasionally. But what Amanda is really looking for when she's making this whiskey is she's looking for big, bold, fruity reds. Now, if you've been sipping on this, you're going to notice there is a lot of big, bold, beautiful, fruity red right on that nose. It is right there. I get all sorts of stuff. I'm a big wine drinker. I love wine. So I get all sorts of stuff, you know, that you would typically notice maybe in a rich, you know, Pinot Noir, or like a big, bright, that Malbec with that jelly jam kind of note to it. Some people are polarized. They don't love a red wine cask finished. So I'm really curious in the comments. Let me know, you know, if you enjoy this one. I always get like, the cuvee and the sherry are like a little turf war, because you got people that lean one direction or the other. I truly think these are both excellent. So I like to say that, what would I say? I would call these the violas and the violas and violins of the orchestra, because they offer like a mood and a smoothness and a drama. So when we're making up the signature malt, we're bringing in sort of that middle tone. You know how violins always kind of sound like they're wailing or they're crying or they're rejoicing? That's kind of what that red wine cuvee does in the blend. You know, it kind of gives it that sexy wine drama. So I hope you really enjoyed this, and this is definitely one of my favorites across the board, and it's by far one of my favorite you know, wine cask matured whiskeys I've ever had in my life. So cheers to this one. So last but not least, this is my personal favorite. I do tend to love sherry cask matured whiskeys. It is something that I truly, my heart sings when I get them. So this is our sherry cask. This is our last one before we go back to the signature blend and kind of taste all those notes. Now, if you are a whiskey person, you will notice that you're going to go out into the universe and you're going to see casks that say Oloroso sherry. That is the absolute #1 sherry type used in aging whiskey in the United States. You might also see Pedro Jimenez. That's or PX. very, very popular in the United States. The definitive thing about our sherry cask is that what Amanda has done is she has taken different barrels. She has taken that Oloroso, she has taken that Pedro Jimenez, but she has also added in Fino. So for those of you who like sherry out there, I'm a big sherry head. I love it to death. I went and studied it and the whole deal. Fino sherry is bright. It is bright and delicate and almost like crystally clear and has notes of like champagne in it. So it's a very astringent, dry, not at all sweet expression of sherry. Because a lot of people have had like cream sherry, really heavy. Fino is the exact opposite. So in this blend of maturing casks that go into this bottle, I like to say that the Fino, this is your woodwind section. The Fino is the fruit, the flutes and the piccolos. So it's that big bright note that just like sings above everybody. And then of course you have your Oloroso, that common type. That's more of a medium-bodied nutty sherry. You're going to get some notes of like some peanut butter, some sunflower butter, like kind of playing around in the middle, as well as some fruit. So I like to say like that's our clarinet. Whenever I say that, I think of like Peter and the Wolf with like the duck clarinet. I don't know. I'm from the 80s. Last but not least, you have your Pedro Jimenez. And I like to think of your Pedro Jimenez as the bassoon, because it is the rich, luscious, sweet base note that's going to be in this sherry cask whiskey. So all three of those come together to create our very, very complex sherry cask expression. I love this whiskey. Well, after the tasting's over, I'll still be sipping it. And I think it's an incredible example of what can be accomplished when you're using sherry casks. So some really beautiful stuff. So that being said, and move over all my stuff over here. There we go. I've talked about her several times tonight. This is our lovely, funny, generous, kind, funky, brilliant lead blender, Amanda Beckwith. She is the woman and the face behind everything that we do. No, I am not Amanda. I go out on the road and people just think we're short brunettes, so we're the same person. But no, I do not have this woman's talent for blending whiskey. Now, I want to be clear about blending. If you're familiar with American whiskey, go out in the world and a lot of people talk about the master distiller. I'm the master distiller. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just that in America, we focus a lot on the mash bill or the kinds of grains that are inside of the whiskey, and we focus a lot on distillation. Well, we don't focus on mash bill because we're 100% malted barley, so there's nothing to talk about really. And distillation for us, what Harry designed is only exists to create excellent distillate, right? So what we want is we want the best distillate in the history of the world. When you're talking about malts, you're talking about Irish malts, Japanese malts, Scottish malts, blending is where it's at, because all the flavor and all the focus and everything is going to come from how Amanda chooses what casks to bring together to create flavors. So that is why she is the conductor that is bringing all of these melodies together to create a perfect orchestral piece. She is the blender, right? She is our very, very talented conductor. So Amanda's a brilliant and curious talent. She was mentored by Dr. Jim Swan, another legend in the industry, Nancy Fraley, also a very well-known blender out on the West Coast. Amanda uses a thing called slow water reduction, and we can talk about that at length if you want to towards the end. But basically what it means is instead of just very quickly sort of adding a lot of water to bring the ABV down, she does it in a very gentle and slow way. So the water incorporates better into the overall flavors of the whiskey, and the whiskey has more of a coherent and subtle complexity to it. And she learned that from working with Nancy Fraley. So pretty cool. So that is all of our whiskey that we have tonight. Courage and conviction, man. The music of courage and conviction. I like to say it's like jazz. It is entirely unique and it is entirely American. And it is something that we are enormously proud of. Just in case you asked the question, because I haven't been watching as much as Sam has, we use no additives. We use no color additives. We use no chill filtration. So if you guys did add water tonight, you might have noticed a little clouding. That's completely normal for a non-chill filtered whiskey. Yeah, Sam, and thank you for answering the question I just saw. Everything that we are tasting tonight is 46% ABV across the board, like right across. Nothing is more or less. And that's because Amanda believes that's the perfect ABV for what we do. And it makes the whiskey sing at that ABV. So before I hand it over to questions and kind of bring Sam on as my super cool sidekick, I just want to posit, we're a tiny company. We're teeny tiny when you think about like Diageo, right? Or White and Mackay, or any of the big dogs, as I like to say in our industry. We're just teeny tiny. And to get the opportunity to speak to you guys today, so many of you that have just such a love for not only UVA, but a love for Virginia and what people are doing in Virginia. It's a great honor. So what does the future hold for Virginia Distillery Company? I think some of that's in your hands, honestly. I think I would love for each of you to go out and just sing from the rafters that you loved our whiskey tonight. George used to say, have the courage of your convictions. And that is where the name of our whiskey comes from. And every day we live by those words in everything that we do, every drop of whiskey that we make, every tasting that we do for you guys. We want to live by the courage of our convictions. And I think it's a really, really beautiful sentiment in a world that sometimes feels a little like it's pulling us at the seams, right? So with the amazing stewardship of Amanda at the conducting of our orchestra, and as well as the tireless conviction of our 4 principles that I mentioned before, world-class distillate, the intentional influence of Virginia's dynamic climate, our unique blend of New World whiskey and Old World maturation, and last but not least, our dedication to the vision of our founder, Dr. George Moore, and the continued stewardship of his son, Gareth, and his widow, Angela. We're just trying to make the best damn American single malt on planet Earth, and I am really, really happy to share it with you guys today. So that is the end of my more formal presentation. I really want to bring Sam on and let him, answer some of these questions. And I am also here to answer any questions you guys have. But first and foremost, I want to know, what was your favorite whiskey? Just put it in the comments. I'm just really curious. What did you think as we sampled through the whole range? And did you get a chance to go back and try the signature blend, the completed symphony? The base blend, the sherry, bourbon cask, baby blue and cuvee. Yeah. 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. I'm loving this bourbon cask. Yes. Sherry cask, Sharon Bragg, I see you. Nice. Joe and Shaney, you said you bought some of the DC Whiskey and Barrel night. I will be at most of those, but I wasn't at that one. I hope it was a fun time. Bourbon and sherry. Yeah, so before we launch into some of the questions, and Sam, I'm gonna let you take the lead a little bit here. I did want to mention, in the blend of the signature malt, 50% of that blend is the bourbon cask. So over 50%, or just at 50%, is the bourbon cask, and then we have a 25-25 between the cuvee and the sherry. So remember, I said the bourbon really is that backbone of the signature malt. So that's why you're getting a lot of that bourbon cask that is coming through. Okay, Mr. Sam, were there any questions that did not get answered? Are there any questions that we'd like to address? Maybe some common questions that came up?
I tried to stay on top of them, but there's some great ones that came in that we didn't quite get to. And some, namely because they got a little complicated and the answer wasn't, just two sentences. So, I think the big one was, do you add water? When? How much? We always get the ice question. So really what I like to say is that this is the best way to introduce yourself to a whiskey, but we're not here to tell you how to drink this whiskey. So, water is usually a preference. It proofs things down, but what it also does is that it dilutes a little bit. So you're not going to get the full punch, and you're not going to get all those flavors right away. So As far as ice goes, I always like to use the Coors Light example. There's a reason that Coors Light wants you to have those mountains blue, and that's because it's really going to dim your senses. It's going to kind of you're not going to perceive all the flavors and aromas. So when you cool something down, again, you're not going to perceive it at what the producer intended. So that's really why we walk you through this tasting this way. That's why you wake your palate up with that first sip. And yeah, so
man, Sam, I really co-sign on that. And guys, I just want to reiterate what Sam said. There is no wrong way to enjoy your whiskey, truly. If you are drinking it and it is making you happy, go for it, right? But this is kind of my response to what Sam just said. Nothing makes me sadder than going into a whiskey bar and I watch somebody order something that's really, 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 really expensive, for any number of reasons, and they just put it right on one of those big whiskey rocks. Because those those big whiskey rocks to me are like the devil himself. Because what they do is they shock the whiskey. The whiskey drops in temperature very quickly. They over dilute the whiskey. They do it very quickly, over dilute, and then every time you drink, it hits you in the face. So I've never figured out what the beauty of that is. Now, I want to reiterate: if you love big whiskey rocks, rock on with your bad self. Like, that's totally cool. As the years have gone on, I used to never drink any barley-based liquid with ice whatsoever, but I live in Southern California now. So I will go and I will get that tiniest, I'm talking tiny, like the size of a penny, and add it to a whiskey every so often. But traditionally malts across the world, single malts, are drunk at room temperature. They're not really meant to be chilled. Whereas, Sam, you said the Coors Light principle. I like to kind of use where's the whiskey from, right? So, or where's the spirit from? If you're drinking a spirit that is made in something like South America, like cachaça, I can't say that right, cachaça. You're gonna want to add ice. Rum, you want to add ice. But when you're making a spirit that was traditionally enjoyed in cold climates, it's like, what were these people making it for, right? Not necessarily to put on ice. So it's just questions to ask yourself. But at the end of the day, the one thing that I would say, the myth: water does not open whiskey. It actually does have a chemical reaction. It can release fatty acid chains, but the term open is not really a thing. So when you hear someone say that, I never correct people, but you can just go, hey, Jenny and Sam, told me it wasn't kind of a real thing. So, just put that little feather in your cap. I did get one really, this is important for you, Sam. I have heard Fridays are the best day for tours. Is that accurate, Sam?
It depends. Do you want to be with people? Do you want to be on your own? We do tours Thursday through Sunday. So Thursdays are less crowded. We only allow a maximum of 8 on our VIP tours. It's a limited tour because we take you up to the Casks houses and our transportation only seats 8 people. So those spots fill up, and Friday they're very busy. So again, I think we've seen some really cool groups come in together as separate groups and really just enjoy the experience and leave as whiskey friends. But if a private tour is what you're going for, I recommend Thursday or Sunday. Those typically don't fill up quite as fast.
Totally. That's a great answer, Sam. I also just saw, where do you source your barley? So I mentioned earlier that all of our barley comes from North America. The largest supplier of our barley currently is Malt Europe, which is ironic because they do business here in the US, even though they are a malt company that is based out of Europe. And the majority of the barley that we get comes from Missouri. So yeah, so North American barley.
Jenny, I'd like to tack on to that because I did see another malt-based question. Folks asked if we malt our own barley. We leave that to the pros. I always, from my time in the beer world, it'd be like growing your own hops. Such a precise science. You have to get those sugars just right. It's grown in a specific way. So if we were to take on that monster endeavor, there would not be much time to perfect our whiskey. So we do leave it to the professionals for malting. It's not an easy science.
No, it is not an easy science. And, even a lot of the places in Scotland that still, do floor malting, they're not really using the floor malting for the bulk of their actual whiskey production. It's more of like I would say dog and pony show. But it's with the amount of whiskey that is drunk in the world now, it's virtually impossible to keep up unless you malt full time. And we don't malt full time; we make whiskey full time. So I'm going to attack this one, and then I want to get back to some of the previous questions, Sam. Brian Woolard, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, said Scotland is known for the different regions. With American single malt starting to grow in popularity across the country, are you seeing regional difference in taste profile? Yes, I love this question. I was just at an event with Balcones and Stranahan's. And one of the things that I noted and I sampled through Stranahan's gave me a couple of their newest releases, which is super cool. What you're beginning to notice is less regional, more house style. Because remember I mentioned that, Amanda, we had this house style of orchard fruit and spice. I tend to notice like Stranahan's, for example, they're out of Colorado. Their whiskey tends to have a graininess. And a graininess is a hard thing to put into words, but it's like you drink the whiskey and there's some chewy. It chews. It has a texture to it. It's not gentle and round in the mouth. Okay, Balcones. A lot of their whiskeys have a little bit more of a bite to them, a little bit more of a structure. They have elbows, right? So it kind of gets in your mouth and kind of like has some angles that kind of hit you all over. Those are choices. Those are house styles in how to make American single malt. So far, of all the American single malts that I've had, ours is the closest to what might be considered a Scottish single malt. If you one of my friends who works for Glendronach the other day, he goes, if you handed me 2 glasses and said, which one's Scottish, I couldn't tell you. And he's a fantastic expert. So we are making a style that I think is a little bit more traditionally a Scottish style, but we're aging it so much faster. So I'm sure that eventually what we're going to notice as the years go on and we start getting to 7, 8, 9-year-old whiskey, we're going to start to see a differentiation between what the Scottish whiskeys are producing. Okay, Sam, what are some of our previous questions?
Yeah, Jenny, can I tag into that last as well? There's also within this country, people are using 2 types of stills. I saw one of these questions come in earlier. So you have a fractional distillation or a column still, and that's really one and done. You put it in the still and it kind of redistills up and down the column. What we do is we use pot stills, again closer to the old world style. And while there's not much literature that I've read on how this affects taste and flavor, it's really in my opinion, when I've had one that's been in a column still versus a pot still, you do notice a difference.
Yeah, I agree.
So you also, what we do is we distill it twice, and you're sort of massaging the spirit, as I like to say. Whereas that, there's no right or wrong, but when you do put it through this column still, you have less control over where that ABV ends up and what's happening during that multiple step distillation versus kind of 1, 2, and then our proofing. So
yeah, and just in case anyone is not familiar with column versus pot, so the biggest single difference between them is a pot still is like kind of fat bottomed like this, and we're going to put the mash in there one time. We're going to run it. We're going to get all the alcohol out, and then we're going to clean that still out and put a new mash inside. Okay, so you are literally using the still one time for a distillation. A column still uses a series. It's literally a column. It was invented by Anus Coffee, actual name. So it's often referred to as a coffee still. It is literally a column that has a series of plates inside it that the alcohol vapors have to fight to get up the plates. And this means that you can continually add mash into the still and run it just like it's referred to as a continuous still. A lot of people, a really good metaphor, Sam, I would use, I feel like a column still is like a CD and like a pot still is like vinyl. People claim vinyl has, a certain kind of texture, right? And people claim a pot still has a certain kind of flavor influence, So I mean, let's keep that one for later. That was a good one.
That'll be on the tour every week now. So.
Oh my God. Okay, what are some of our previous questions? I am watching new questions come in.
Yeah, this one's pretty interesting. I'll do my best at answering, or we'll do our best at answering. But so James said, without using corn like bourbon does, how would you make a single malt American whiskey sweeter?
That's a great
Um,
question.
I think what we saw throughout the tasting is that some of these are sweeter, bigger bodied. You can even see it has in wine, they call them legs, it's really viscosity, sugar based, and you're getting that out of the wood you choose. So whether it's our STR cask that we shave, toast, and rechar, recooper, or like our sherry. The sherry seems to have that previous sherry product impact, and it does add sugar both through the wood and through the previous product. So other than that, there's a couple other ways. I would say you could probably alter your cuts within your distillation, because there's different levels of sugar where you make those cuts, but you're sacrificing weird off flavors and aromas. So yeah, I think the barrel would be the best answer for adding sugar.
I think so too. And Sam, one of the things that I address sometimes, God, I'm so glad you're here. This is so fun to have a conversation with you, because we've never gotten to do this before. This is like super fun. Is that like one of the things in whiskey, and this is true in bourbon too, because bourbon has a really high level of perceived sweetness. And what I mean by that is when you drink a big caramelly, and we keep using the word viscous, but viscous is true. It's like, imagine like if 10 is maple syrup and like 1 is water, the viscosity is like, are we moving closer towards the feeling of maple syrup in your mouth, right? Not the sweetness, but the feeling of that, it's literally coating your mouth. Bourbons don't have any sugar inside them. They're a distilled spirit, but they have perceived sweetness. So what we can do is, as Sam said, is depending on the maturation cask that we use, and depending on the esters that we've produced during fermentation, we can create perceived sweetness. For instance, there is absolutely, I love how I'm holding up a generic glass, but I'm holding up the bourbon one. There is no apple flavor. There's no apple additive in this, but what we've done to it between the cask type and the fermentation is we've given you the perceived sweetness of biting into a Granny Smith apple. So we can manipulate it, with those two elements. I hope that helped.
And oftentimes it's the same chemical compound. So during fermentation, it's the yeast metabolize, and these off flavors and aromas are the actual chemical compound in a banana or clove or an apple. So it's what gives an apple or a strawberry. So you are in fact molecularly eating or tasting an apple, is what always was fun.
Such a weird thought, actually.
Weird, right? Yeah.
No banana sugar, but you're eating the molecule of banana. Yeah. Really, really interesting. Do you vary the level of charge? Not to my knowledge, Sam. I think that we have a very consistent runtime, right?
I think this is in char in reference to our barrels.
No charge in relation to heat exposure to the distillate.
Oh. Let's see. They followed up with charge, and
I'm sorry. Okay, because this is a really funny moment, because charging is exposing it to heat.
Yeah,
so you're not wrong, John. Okay, char. Sam, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. It's really sort of up to, with the exception of the Cuvée cask, which I learned this, less than 24 hours ago talking to Amanda. With the shave, toast, and rechar, you're really walking a fine line between toasting and a light char. We love metaphors and analogies here, and I always use the 2 types of marshmallow roasters to explain the difference between toasting and charring. Toasting is like the marshmallow roaster that patiently waits above the flame and develops that perfectly, tempered marshmallow, and then charring is putting that in the bottom of the fire and recklessly waving it about to put it out. So there's a fine line between toasting. It's all about caramelizing the sugars, and so it's a really a toast and a light char on the STR. So I think Amanda said it would be close to like a 2, if that makes if that makes any sense for our bourbon aficionados out there. But it is.
So that's really interesting. Let me just reiterate that, Sam, because traditional char level for all bourbon casks, now with some variation, is char 4, right? So with the STR method that we use, we're taking that down to a 2.
So there's a long answer, of course, and really with the folks doing the STR, it's up to the cooper. It's Jim Swan's method that they're trying to emulate, and what we like to select our STR barrels. So yeah, it's really a light toast or a heavy toast and a light char on that shape layer of exposed wine. So yeah, around a 2, maybe up into a 3 potentially, but yeah, that's the benefit of having Amanda right behind you at your desk. You're like, wait a minute, and then you learn, and you just keep learning daily. So
that's fantastic. Okay, I do want to answer a couple of these. But Sam, are there any previous questions we haven't gotten to?
I think we're doing pretty well with staying up to date with them.
Okay, so the next one then is the cider cask and your cider cask finish from a local VA cidery. Dora did respond to this. I want to give a little bit more of a comprehensive answer. So what's super cool is that we are down the road from Laird's Apple Brandy. So we're not just using cider. We do use Potter's cider, which you guys I think did a tasting with. So Potter's is part of the cask influence, but we do also use Laird's. And we use a selection of apple-based Calvados from France. So even though it's a cider cask, the whiskey that we are creating has a much more complex apple expression to it because it's not just a cider. And that's something, again, these are some of these sneaky little things that Amanda does, that she's like sneaking some Calvados in there that you wouldn't expect. To create just a more complex finished whiskey. So that's a great question. And yes, we are very good friends with Potters. We are also very good friends with Laird's. They also have taken some of our casks and used them in their production as well. So where do you get the bourbon casks? Mentioned this a little bit earlier. We primarily source from Willett Family Reserve and Woodford. That's not to say that every single cask is from those people. It's just that those are our primary sources. I know that Amanda is heading out to Louisville in about 2 months to look at some new cask sources. So that might change. We don't know. Are you creating long-term aged whiskey? I cannot comment on that. I would just say watch this space, so proprietary secrets.
Jenny, we did get the E versus no E in the whiskey.
Oh, that's a great question. Sam, do you want to take it? Do you want me to talk about it?
I'll tag in. I think you probably you get this more than I do. I'm sure in your world.
Oh, that was.
I'm sorry. Passing.
That's right. You can obviously see that Sam and I have an amazing time together. So basically, the loose rule is that if the country of origin has E in its name, America, or I don't know, let's say Ireland, the whiskey will have an E in its name. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to that, and we are one of them. So one of the most famous whiskey makers in America that does not use the E is George Dickel. Because when George Dickel started making whiskey, he said that his whiskey was as fine as any whiskey ever made in Scotland. And so he took the E out. So you're going to notice that despite the fact that George Dickel whiskey is considered a Tennessee whiskey or an American whiskey, they don't use the E either. So yes, that is the decision that we made, because we make single malt whiskey, which is a new category in the United States. We wanted there to be a differentiation between that and something like what is called American whiskey, Tennessee whiskey. Bourbon is whiskey, rye is whiskey. It's often not referred to in that way. We don't walk around saying bourbon whiskey, but rye and bourbon tend to use the E as well, as does Canadian whiskey. So yeah, it was a conscious choice to sort of differentiate ourselves as American single malt whiskey makers. So yeah, it was a great question. Oh, okay, here's a good one. What foods would you pair your whiskeys with? I added the with. Okay, the number one hard no is spicy food. So capsaicin, which is found in a lot of spicy food, bonds with alcohol in your mouth, and it causes that experience that you have of what the body perceives as heat in the mouth to sometimes times up to 100. So if you are pairing hot chicken wings and bourbon, you're gonna hate your life. So don't do that. Other than that one kind of guidepost, there are very few things that I would say don't go with whiskey. I like some really odd choices. I think something lighter style like our bourbon cask would go very well with seafood. A lot of people don't, necessarily think seafood and whiskey, but sushi and whiskey is really darn good. Chocolate loves whiskey. Any fatty food loves whiskey. So as long as you're staying away from barbecue with heat to it, fatty meats love whiskey. I mean, it's kind of like an obvious pairing. Steak and a single malt is like perfect. If you, are vegan inclined or vegetarian inclined, you can do, a rich tofu actually goes very well. Like a seitan goes very well with whiskey as well. So it's broad. Just stay away from peppers, hot food, hot sauce. It is not your friend while drinking. It is, and you're going to hate yourself tomorrow. I promise. So thank you, Victoria. You took care of the purchase link. Are you with Virginia ABC stores? Sam, will you take that one?
Yeah, actually, we are a Virginia ABC store at this beautiful building you can see behind me. So what I always tell people is if you're in the state of Virginia, you can order all of our products online. There's different products that get distributed to different ABC stores, and we have all of them. So if you're in the neighborhood, swing by, see us. If you're a little further away, you could take the gamble on trying to find your favorite product at the ABC store, but much easier to get it shipped directly from us to your doorstep. Just make sure you're there and have a valid ID to sign the package, or it comes back to us.
Yes, don't leave your ID at home like I did in my trip to Aspen this past week. So great question, Angelica. I really am glad you pointed this out. What are Amanda's flavors for Cuvée and Sherry? I failed to mention, so I want to make sure I mention them. For Cuvée, it is dried cherries with cocoa and ginger. So a pitted red cherry with cocoa and ginger. And then for the sherry, it is going to be fig and apricot with a dash of ginger and clove. So that is straight from the horse's mouth, to the point that I have them written down because I want to make sure I'm spot on. Cool. Yeah, Maker's Mark, another American whiskey that drops the E. I always say pour one out for Dave Pickerel, old friend that used to make Maker's Mark. What is the char condition of the barrel in aging the cuvee versus the bourbon cask? Sam, I don't know this answer. Based on what you mentioned previously, we're taking everything down to approximately char 2. Is that accurate across every cask that we're utilizing?
Yeah, if it's all sourced from the same cooper, they keep it consistent. But I think the question, does it try and figure out comparatively bourbon versus cuvee? Is that what it says?
Yeah. Is the char level the same?
So it's different, right? Because the STR is such a unique cask, and it creates such a unique product because they're shaving a layer of that wine barrel. They're exposing those wine sugars, and then they're creme brulee. You're getting such a different. But with bourbon, our bourbons, especially as Jenny mentioned, they're we call them FB1s, first use, but they're really our first use. So in their first life, they had bourbon. So another analogy I like to use is the tea steeping analogy, where if you were to steep a tea bag a second time, you'll pull out less flavors, less tannin, less color. That's exactly what happens in our bourbon barrels. That first run of the bourbon pulled out a lot of that color, flavor, tannin. So that's why what you're left with when you have our bourbon product is a really light, fruit forward expression. And so with that STR, that cuvee cask, it's a brand new char. So that's why it's going to be the most kind of caramel, vanilla, by far the darkest expression we offer currently. And that's because it's a new char versus an old char. So
you know what? I'm going to show this in real time because I have the bottles in front of me. So this is, and remember, we use no color whatsoever. So this is actually from the barrel, and you can look at the difference in color between the two. there we go, between the two whiskeys. This is the bourbon cask, and that is that red wine cuvee. And Sam, some of that color is coming from the residual wine also that was in there.
Exactly.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a beautiful, like ruby red color right there. Gorgeous. Awesome. Okay. Oh yeah, so sweet. Victoria just gave a shout out. We actually partner with a fantastic chocolatier named Mylène Jardin. And they are so lovely, and they make bespoke chocolate truffles that are meant to be sampled with each of the expressions of courage and conviction whiskey. So if you're into chocolate and you had a good time tonight, you can order that on our website. Mylène is just like, she's just a charming, wonderful person. You can follow her on Instagram as well. Let's see, just double checking. Okay, so I think we're kind of running down. We got about 9 minutes left. Does anybody have any last questions before we kind of close it out? We hand it back to Victoria. Any last minute concerns, queries? There's no dumb questions. Okay.
Let me ask if anyone who thinks of a question later on, or anyone on the recording who weren't able to join, if they have any questions, are we able to point them your way?
Absolutely.
As you can see, everyone's inquisitive and loves the information. So, anyone who has any other questions, if it's okay, we'll shoot them over your way and have you answer them.
Well, before I totally bounce, just wanted to give a couple call outs. Not only do I hold the position as head of advocacy, but I also hold the position of select private cask sales. So if there's anyone out there in UVA land that would like to own their own personal cask, that is also what I do. We will take new make spirit, and then it's kind of a choose your own adventure. It's a really exciting program, and it's very exclusive and very limited based on availability. So if you're interested, please let Victoria know, and I can share my contact. And I just want to say, like, I have done so many tastings. I am so overwhelmed by the response of the alum here. You guys are an incredible audience. You've asked incredible questions. It is a gift to be here. I know Sam has had a great time. I've had a great time. I really want to thank Victoria Wren and our team member Dora Oliver, who's on the call. They got together and they made this magic happen. I am just the talking head. They are the ones who wrangled everything and made it so that we could celebrate with you guys here today. We are honored to be talking to UVA alum. I mean, you guys are the heart and soul of everything that we do. So thank you for having us tonight. And cheers to all of you. I hope you had a fantastic time.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Sam, I think you also you have some closing remarks too. We're going to try to convince you all to visit, good old UVA. So Sam, tell us a little bit about what we can incentivize everybody who registered.
Yeah, and I may bring Dora in if she's listening. We with this program, we did a special 50% off a tour. So we would love for y'all to reach out to us directly. You can either do that via email, a contact form on our website, but we would love to have you out and have you see the beautiful copper stills and the climate that it's all aged in. So again, 50% off a tour and tasting, and just reach out to us. I think Victoria, you said we could potentially send a follow-up email with contact info on that.
Yes, absolutely. So everyone, we will send a copy of the recording, some information on the VIP tour. I really encourage you, if you're going to make the trip to Charlottesville, make a little bit of time and come visit Virginia Distillery. Shoot me a text and invite me too. It's only fair. But no, thank you everyone for joining today. I couldn't have done this without all of the other clubs on the call, honestly. 260 people in a virtual event, meeting who's and just seeing you drink and sip and ask your questions. This is so amazing. To all the various club leaders that I've emailed, thank you for working with me and Virginia Distillery to bring this to your constituents. This won't be the last one, you guys. We love our booze. We love supporting local Charlottesville businesses. So just keep your eyes peeled down the line for more events like this. you can ask that. Actually, I'm going to share my screen really quickly so I can show you the link. But if you, let me see, yeah, you all can see my screen. It says stay engaged. This will be sent out, but if you go to the UVA Clubs events program, you can see all of the events, all the different clubs they're doing. So if you see something virtual on there, join them. I'm sure they'd love to have you. There's some like virtual book clubs, all sorts of different events. So, I appreciate you supporting your clubs. Just if you want to keep staying engaged and try more events and learn different things, keep an eye out for other fun events happening. We also will send more information on if you were interested in buying another kit or buying anything else from the website. I know Virginia Distillery really appreciates it. But yeah, all of that will be sent out in a follow-up email in about no later than a week. So when we can get the recording out. So thank you guys all so much for joining us. I will sign off with a cheers and go Who's. So if you've still got any left in you, one last sip, but cheers and go Who's, guys.
Go Who's.
Have a wonderful evening. We will see you soon.